7 o'clock, so I think we'll go ahead and start, if that's okay. So good evening. My name is Annette Mills, and on behalf of the Corvella Sustainability Coalition and Seeds for the Soul, welcome. Thanks for coming out tonight. As I'm sure you know, it is incredibly important for us to be making the transition to greater energy efficiency in our homes, and we really appreciate your interest in finding out how you can do that and do it affordably. So here's our agenda for tonight. We're going to just take a few minutes to give you a brief background on the Shift Together campaign that this program is part of. And then the bulk of our time will be hearing presentations from our three speakers, and then we'll have time for you to ask some questions as well. And then, as you can see on the side here, we've got Energy Trust of Oregon and Seeds for the Soul, who are here to give you more one-on-one if you would like to afterwards. So the Corvella Sustainability Coalition has 12 action teams, including an energy action team. And just about 2 years ago, after many years of doing different kinds of efforts to educate people in the community about energy saving opportunities, we launched a new campaign called Shift Together. And it is designed to support everyone in our community, not just homeowners, but businesses as well, with the resources and funding that we all need to make the shift together toward energy efficiency and renewable energy. And we know that we're going to need everyone to make the shift that we need to make to get where we need to be. So our partner in this campaign is Seeds for the Soul, which is a co-sponsor of tonight's event. And a key part of the Shift Together campaign is providing free home energy assessments so we can help residents determine their energy saving priorities and inform them about cost saving opportunities. Seeds for the Soul offers quick 30-minute on-site home energy assessments, free, of course, and they've done hundreds of these assessments during the past several years, primarily for low and middle income households. These assessments have resulted in major home improvements, such as heat pumps that provide both heating and cooling, insulation upgrades, heat pump water heaters, energy efficient windows, new solar systems. So a lot of opportunities out there. Another type of home energy assessment is offered by Energy Action Team member Nancy Evanson, who is a retired architect. Unfortunately, Nancy could not be here this evening, but just to let you know, she does something called home retrofit clinics. And what that is, it's a free 2-hour Zoom consultation. It's a one-on-one kind of thing, directed primarily at middle income and upper income households. And she meets online with individual homeowners, helping them determine their priorities and their cost saving opportunities. And during the past 4 years, she has completed more than 150 of these personalized retrofit clinics. So those are two important parts of the Shift Together campaign. Now, to reach people more quickly, we launched a new project this past year called Home Energy House Parties. And the first house party was held at Nancy's home, and she invited her neighbors. 19 people attended, representing 13 households. And if any of you have neighbors you would like to invite in your home, or a book group, or just some of your friends, or any kind of organized group you belong to, let us know, because we want to have more of these house parties as a way of getting the word out to people. So what happened in Nancy's case, she was already a resource person. So she had packets that she passed, that she gave out to each person who was there, that told about the energy saving opportunities and so on. So if you were to host a house party, then home energy house party, then we would have a resource person there to provide the information, is how that works. We also offer two types of events to reach a broader audience in the community. And the first is a home energy fair, which features exhibitors that include both nonprofits and contractors that can help attendees of these fairs move toward greater energy efficiency and cost savings. And we've held two of these fairs so far in 19, dating myself, in 2023. We did our first fair at Franklin Square Park. And then this past summer, we did one at Lily Park. And then finally, we also have been having a series of these programs like this one tonight. In 2023, we did our first program on affordable solar. And then last year, we did one on heat pumps, heating and cooling your home with a heat pump. So tonight's program is our third in this series on building envelope. So with that background, let's get started. And our first presenter is Jeremy Anderson, who works for Total Comfort Weatherization. And let's give him a warm welcome. Okay, and all you have to do is hit the little arrow and it'll go up.
All right. Hi.
Hi.
So give me about 20 minutes to talk about what a building envelope is. I could talk for about 6 hours easily on what a building envelope is, and I imagine it would be tremendously boring. So really quickly, why are you here? What do you want to know? How are you? You're sitting in front. What made you come over here at 7?
I'm here, I'm on the climate advisory board for the city. And so I want to find out what's going on here with the sustainability goal, so I can figure out how we can support it.
Cool. Who else? Who's actually interested in building envelope? One came out at 7 o'clock on a Friday or Wednesday or whatever. Okay. So then I'll try and get through some of this stuff, but I'm going to do it really fast. And if somebody wants to talk about something, just interrupt me, please, because otherwise, like I said, it's going to be really boring if I just start talking. Okay. So why should you care? It's because your envelope is what separates you from the outside. This is what's going to keep you warm and dry. So it keeps you from paying high heat bills. It's what's going to also prevent you from having big expensive problems on your house like mold, mildew, and rot. The other key thing is the number of people who understand this is distressingly small. And so if you don't care about it and you don't take your own, kind of advocate for yourself, there's a good chance that you might have a bunch of the problems that you'll see in these slides, because I brought you pictures of ugly things. Okay, so when we're talking about a building envelope, first thing to know is you don't just have a building envelope. You have several of them. You've got a thermal envelope. You've got an air envelope. You've got a water or a moisture envelope. And one of the biggest ways that people run into problems is not understanding that they're different and not understanding where they're supposed to be and what they're doing. So the thermal envelope is the one that most people think about. When I got invited to come here tonight, I'm sure that's what everybody was thinking. So this is really about what is the R value of your insulation, how good are your windows, thermally speaking? So this is separating you. It's really talking about conductive radiant heat transfer. We also have an air barrier. This is what people used to call drafts and still do, I suppose. But it's a little bit more complicated. You want to get airflow where you want. You don't want airflow where you don't want it. And you want just the right amount of airflow in your house most of the time in places. Okay, then you have a moisture envelope. The easy part to think about this is you have a roof, you have siding, you have windows. They're supposed to keep the rain out. But we also need to think about vapor transmission because, believe it or not, more people that I run into have problems from condensation than they do from. Okay, so when we're talking about thermal envelope, we've got attic insulation, we've got wall insulation, we've got underfloor insulation, you got your windows, and the one that people tend to forget about, you have your duct system. Your heat ducts, people tend not to think about, are this little extension of your thermal envelope that goes in unpleasant places usually, and has particularly high susceptibility to have problems. When we're looking at what's good and what's bad, key things you want to think about are what the R value is. This is really what kind of material do you have to separate you from the outside and how thick is it? That'll tell you it's thermal conductivity to separate the heat from the outside or both inside and outside. But you also got to think about, is it aligned with your air barrier? We can talk more about that, but this is a good day for it. If you walk around with a loose knit wool sweater and it's windy outside, it doesn't really matter what the R value is because the wind blows right through it. And your house is just the same. So you need to make sure you've got an air barrier, which is basically a windbreaker, and some insulation, like a sweater. And then you got to think about bypasses. These are just the places that get missed. The holes. They're all over your house if you go with them. A nice barrier, and then don't get overrun by all sorts of crazy things that plumbers and electricians do. Okay, so this is an attic. It's hard to see here. This is like 1 inch of cellulose insulation. This does not do much. Current code right now is R49. In fiberglass, that's 18 inches deep in your attic that you're looking for insulation. If you got less than about 6 inches of insulation in your attic, please talk to Seeds or call me or do something about it. There is no excuse because there's so much money available to help you pay to get your attic insulated that it should be a no-brainer. You also see lots of stuff like this if you go looking around. This right here is bare sheetrock. Somebody had insulated this kind of all right at one point, and then some electricians came in and decided to dig holes through it. They have bare sheetrock. That's in their bathroom. It's very, very cold in that bathroom. And in fact, it's so cold that the sheetrock is hitting the dew point, condensing and growing mold on the underside. And this is super common stuff that happens all the time. Other just interesting things in this picture. You see this black stuff? This is the original insulation from like the 50s or 60s. This little fluffs of white, this is what somebody paid some insulator to come put in. As you can see, that is not exactly continuous, and that is not exactly 16 to 18 inches deep. So, buyer beware. Solution, blow in a bunch more insulation. It's not actually that simple. There's a bunch of prep work that needs to be done first. But when we're thinking about the thermal envelope, really, we're just trying to get lots of insulation and get it really thick. So when it's all said and done, it should look something like this. Okay, then you got wall insulation. If your house is built before the mid-70s, there's a reasonable chance that you don't have any. And if you do, it's probably pretty lousy, especially in Corvallis. Corvallis was one of the last places in the country to get wall insulation and one of the most resistant to get. There was apparently some very influential professor nearby who was sure that wall insulation would rot your house out. Turns out he was wrong. So wall insulation is a very nice thing to do. There are ways to check. We can pull off electrical plug plates like this. We pull this off right here. You can usually see between the junction box and the sheetrock, and you can look right into the walls and you can see what you have for insulation. Sometimes take a little probe in and feel around. Or if you're fancy like me and you got an infrared camera, if we get a nice cold, a nice hot day, we can walk around and see it. Yeah.
So the library does have the infrared camera that you can borrow. And so I brought one home and I found out like on the top rim up there, that was before they put the insulation on the top plate and you can see the color difference all the way around.
It's pretty cool that they'll loan you an infrared camera. Prices have come down, but the first one that our company bought was $50,000. So,
I doubt if it's that level of quality.
yeah, well, it was a while ago and it wasn't that great of a camera. They just used to be really expensive.
Yeah, we've also heard about like you can get attachments for your smartphone that are like a lens.
Yes, I have seen those and they are surprisingly decent.
Yeah.
They're not fantastic, but they're not bad.
You know, if you're interested, those exist.
Okay, if you have no wall insulation or if you have particularly lousy wall insulation, there are things you can do about it. This is the easy way. We pop off some of the siding, drill a hole through the subsiding, pack it full of dry fiberglass, and you'll end up with better insulation than most new homes.
So does it settle down over time?
Not if you do it right. You want to see a picture of that? Okay, that is a house that we had insulated probably 20 years ago. They had a flood. They had like a washer. Had a flood. So the disaster restoration guys came in. You can see right here, they cut the bottom 4 feet of the sheetrock off. They dug the wet insulation out of the bottom. This is dense packed blown fiberglass. There's nothing holding that in. There's no binder. There's no nothing. It's just packed so tightly that it stays put. I had this on my own house. I mean, not this, but similar thing on my own house. When I moved in, Total Comfort had insulated the walls maybe 5 or 6 years before. I had hideous paneling in my dining room. I took it off because I work all the time. It took me about 2 weeks to get sheetrock back up. At that point, I had 2 dogs and a toddler. The insulation was just fine. It packs in very, very tightly. Actually, when we fill the walls, they usually start at the top
and fill down to the bottom. Because it'll pack so tightly to the sides that it'll stay put. Because all that fiberglass are just like little springs that interlock with each other, and they'll get enough tension on the side, it won't go anywhere. But you can dig it out or push through it if you need to, like these guys did.
So what's too tight? Because if you take something that's insulation and pack it together too tightly, then it doesn't have the air spaces in between.
Very true. Very unlikely to ever get to that point on wall insulation because the sheetrock or plaster will blow off your walls first. But that is part of the reason why you do not want to blow your own or do your own wall insulation. A lot of this stuff is potentially DIY-able. Wall insulation or wall injection is absolutely not. This is a very, very specific skill set that takes forever to learn.
So if you had the insulation blown into your walls more than 25 years ago, would that settle?
Depends on what was blown in and how good of a job they did.
Right.
If it was cellulose, probably. If it was urea formaldehyde foam, probably. If it was fiberglass and they did a good job, should be just fine. If it was quite a few of the different varieties of foam, should be just fine. So, only real way to know is either open up some holes or go through the infrared camera. Although it was only 25 years ago, even if it settled some, it's probably not super cost effective to do much about it now, unless you just really, really care. But I don't know, I guess check out the infrared camera from the library. Okay, moving down under your floor. If your house was built before really the 80s, unless somebody has done something about it, it probably looks like this, which is zero insulation at all, which is probably why your feet are cold all winter long. It'd be really nice to do something about that, but preferably don't do it like this. So we see a lot of this stuff too. Somebody had probably done an okay job of insulating, and then plumbers or raccoons got to it or something. A lot of people's crawl spaces look like that, where all the insulation is there and it's on the ground. A lot of people's crawl spaces look like this, where somebody started doing it and apparently this was too hard, and so they decided to skip it. Or like this. Here's a great one.
Gosh.
Anybody see the problem with this particular install?
A little extra airflow in there.
A little extra airflow. This is super common. If you have a house built in the early 2000s, chances are your underfloor looks just like this, where the insulation is sitting down, it's not in contact with the floor. It's doing something, but it's kind of like walking around with your jacket on a cold day like this. The air blows right through it. It doesn't do much. You can also have cool stuff like this. So all sorts of problems here. Number one, the insulation's in backwards. That paper facing needs to be on the warm side. Otherwise you risk condensation. It's falling down all over the place, and I guess they just skipped stuff over there anyway. There's a lot of stuff like that. This is kind of what you want. So this is an in-progress shot. You want the insulation to be firm, no gaps, kind of like zipping your jacket up. You want it to be even on the bottom and all nice and twined and look pretty. One of the nice things about insulation is if it looks nice and pretty and boring, it's probably doing a good job. Okay, don't forget about windows. If you have aluminum windows, people make pots and pans out of aluminum because it is so good at moving heat in them. You don't want heat moving through your windows. So please, if you have aluminum ones, let's talk about getting rid of them. If you have old wood ones, it might be hit or miss, but it is amazing what new windows can do. Square footage wise, most people just don't have a whole lot of square footage of windows in the shell of their house. So it's hard to make huge improvements. But on a per square foot basis, windows are usually terrible and there's lots of room for improvement. Also, if you have stuff like this, so this is a vinyl window. It doesn't close anymore. These people had left their window open for like 10 years because they couldn't close it. That's the kind of stuff that would be really nice to fix if we can. We could talk about this slide for a very long time, but it looks kind of boring. These are National Fenestration Rating Council stickers. Sounds pretty exciting. Every window that you buy is going to have one of these stickers on it. This will tell you how energy efficient the sticker is. So the super short version, this number right here that says U factor or U value, that is the same thing as an R value for insulation, but it's inverted because it's cooler that way. If you want to talk about the math side of that at some point, let's talk later, but U values are better. So the smaller the number, the better. Current code is a 0.27, this is 0.24, so, you know, it's a fair bit better than code. Solar heat gain coefficient, this is a super interesting number. This is how much radiant heat moves through. So when the sun is hitting your house, how much that greenhouse factor comes through. There is not a right or wrong about whether this is a big number or a small number. It's all about what you want. Some people want to have a greenhouse. Some people think they live in Arizona and they want to reflect all the heat out. You can pick what number you want, but it's probably the biggest advancement in glass for windows for the last maybe 10 years is that it is now reasonably affordable to pick the solar heat gain coefficient you want. It's not just a standard number anymore. So there are lots of flavors of what's called low E that you can choose from. Yeah.
So one thing I learned about the R values, some of the windows, they say 60. You know, that R value isn't 60, it's actually like on double glazed, it's actually like 0.6. Isn't that right?
Yes, so an R value is the inverse of a U value. So in R values, which is what we usually talk about for fiberglass insulation, they're relatively big numbers and the bigger the better. So current codes are 49 for your attic, are 30 under your floor. U values are the inverse of that number. These are very small numbers. Anything that you're going to get today is going to be a point something. Current code is a 0.27. You want to be smaller than that if you can. Yeah.
So the other thing that I figured out, if you have a wall that's a R11 wall, and if you have a window, that's a 0.6 R window, 1 square foot of glass loses as much heat as maybe 100 square foot of wall. So when I see things like this, these huge windows being open, there's an awful lot of cold. So at our house, we have these very thick curtains that we put up, we even string across the bottom. So it stops the convection current, but you know, so many people leave their windows open and you know, at 10 times worse than the wall per square foot, you're losing an awful lot of heat out the window.
That can definitely be true. We'd have to check your math on a few things. You're probably right, but on the, you know, kind of the actual numbers on it. But yes, windows are always going to be the weakest link in your house. Even if you get really good windows, a really, really good windows, maybe like an R4, and your wall insulation should be like an R23. So, but if you do get a window, please check your NFRC sticker, because if it says 0.6, it better be for a garden shed or a garage and not for your house. Okay, water barrier, super quick version on this is a underside of an attic. This is water pouring in. This is mold and fungus and stuff growing. If your roof leaks, it's a problem. You don't need me to tell you this stuff. But if your roof is leaking, please fix it before you do anything else. These are other siding and rot problems that happen all the time. You see this right here, we've taken the window out. This is vinyl siding that was put on over the existing siding. Nobody decided to seal underneath the windows, so all the water from the windows pouring in. This is a super, super common thing. This was a retrofit window put in. Somebody cut the nail fins off. See this little copweed right here is failed. Water gets down in this gap. It gets funneled in this miter joint right there. Goes right behind and rots out your siding to the inside. Water barriers are important. Otherwise you get stuff that looks like this. So this isn't too bad, but this is all rot. This is all rot. That's rotten fungus and mold and all sorts of gross things that happen from not doing things carefully. The answer to most of the problems, by the way, is this little piece of metal right here that probably cost $2. That's window flashing. It solves a world of problems. So we can talk about all that at quite a bit more detail, but it is very important to keep the water out of your house. Okay, then you got to think about air movement.
So the simple way we did that, we bought a dehumidifier for $125, and it's taken out maybe a half a gallon a day of moisture out of the house. We just move it from room to room. It's always picking up moisture, and so anyway, that's a simple thing to do.
Yes, dehumidifiers can be extremely helpful. There are plenty of other ways to deal with moisture issues.
but that one is pretty much a surefire. Okay, so the other envelope thing that we want to talk about really quickly is the air barrier. Getting back to ducts, this is the one that people tend to forget about. Who wants to tell me why you think that air leaks in your ducts are the most important thing out there? Anybody? Somebody. Somebody else, I mean, go for it, but somebody else got to talk. Can't just do this guy.
Well, the one thing we found out, we were running the heating it, till we opened up the manhole. And we found out the temperature underneath the house was the same as the temperature inside the house.
That is super common. In fact, it's pretty common. People's crawl spaces are hotter than the inside of their house when they have duct leaks. Because
Yeah, because you're heating the outside. Like
Yeah.
if you have a leak in your duct, it's outside your barrier, you're heating the outside. You're not heating the inside of your house or cooling the inside of your house.
exactly. And your ducts are pressurized. A hole doesn't do much, air doesn't move through a hole if there's no pressure difference. But the whole point of a duct system is to have a pressure difference, high pressure differences. It's also usually the hottest air in your house. And so if it blows out on your floor or in your attic, it's just not cool. So people do all sorts of things, super awesome duct repairs like this, leaving giant 1-inch gaps down the length of the duct. If your house is built after like the mid-80s, you probably don't have metal ductwork. You probably have flexible ductwork, which is made out of like party balloon mylar and garbage bag plastic. And for most people, taped together with some sort of random duct tape-ish stuff. And so things like this happen. You're talking about your house, the same temperature inside and outside. This house, which had this really nice tall crawl space, was like, I think it was 98 degrees in the crawl space. They were heating that and waiting for that heat to radiate up into their house. Because not a single one of their ducts was connected. They had their gas furnace just chugging along 24/7, heating the crawl space. This is a slightly over the top example, but it is really not that uncommon. We also get all sorts of cool stuff like this, especially if you live downtown Corvallis and you have intermittent flooding. Back in the day, nobody realized apparently that keeping the ducts more than like an inch off the mud was a good idea. And so you get a lot of rusted corners and elbows and stuff. Even in new stuff. So this was like brand new. Nobody ever got around to sealing all these. Just places where things can look at. Other cool things. So wrapping insulate, if you have a leaky duct, wrapping it in insulation does not actually help very much, other than it'll tell us where it's leaking, because that fiberglass over time will act like an air filter and it will get dirty. And you can look at the dirty spots and that's where it's leaking. So you see this kind of like nice pink insulation here, and then you look at the bottom of it and it looks filthy dirty. This is somebody's cold air return. They've been sucking air from their garage in through their fiberglass air filter into the furnace for, 20 years or something. Good stuff to look for. Other cool things, flex duct does not last forever. When you buy a box of flex duct, especially back in the day, a lot of times they tell you to have like a 35-year life expectancy on it. Some of this stuff has been around for 55 years plus now. A lot of it's turning to dust on the inside. You ever notice like pieces of fiberglass coming out of your duct system? Probably your duct's disintegrating. There are fixes for these things. We can seal them up. So if you have metal ducts, you just screw the joints together, which is again, something that people didn't really think about in like the 60s or the 70s or the 80s or the 90s, 2000s. And then take mastic paste, goop them all up. So it's this bucket of like semi-hard rubbery goo, slather all over the outside. It's kind of like putting a cast on the ducts, and it'll stop the air from blowing out, and then get them all insulated so they look like that. And if you're going to insulate it, make sure it stays on by tying it on the twine. Somebody had asked me about blower door testing earlier. Yeah. So if you want to be super cool, we can pressure test all this stuff and find out how airtight your duct system is, how airtight the shell of your house is, and start tracking down where leaks are. It's really fun. It's about the only thing that we really encourage homeowner participation for. If you ever want to do this, it's a fun day. I don't suggest you do it when it's 28 or 29 degrees outside though, because it sucks lots of cold air in your house, as people this week have found out. Okay, who wants to tell me where the worst drafts in your house are? Anybody? Our engineer friend?
Over the stove from the
the top of the vent hood.
Definitely could be if it's missing a backdraft damper. Anybody else?
Front door.
Front door, super common answer. I would be willing to bet unless you have had blower door testing and air sealing done, you are both absolutely dead wrong, and that it's underneath your floor. Plumbers used to carry chainsaws to cut holes for pipes. Nobody's ever sealed these things unless it was us or a couple other people around. You get a lot of even stuff like this. So somebody wanted to bring one little low voltage wire here. Well, they drilled 3 holes for it. Air just drafts up through that stuff. Here's another one. At least they brought a bunch of wires through their hole, but until they got foamed, like the air and the mice and the spiders and whatever were all just crawling right up there. I don't know exactly what they were doing here, but our guys spray foamed this because apparently there's air drafting around that as well. There are just holes everywhere. Recessed lights are another big one. Luckily now we have integrated LED trim, so there's some really easy fixes for these. But older recessed can lights, if you look at them, had holes manufactured in the top of them. They draft air like mad. Leads to drafty homes and also leads to a lot of moldy attics. So this is an infrared camera, and you can see this kind of cool starburst effect coming out. That's cold air pouring in. That, by the way, is a plumbing hole. If you look underneath your tub or your shower, most people have like a 1 square foot hole underneath them. It takes a heck of a lot of doors and a lot of undampered range hoods to add up to a square foot. Okay, so we talked about where you want to keep air in. There's another place where you want to make sure you have lots and lots of ventilation, which is the space between the thermal envelope and the moisture barrier of your house, which for most people is your attic and your crawl space. There's some other interesting situations out there. But when you don't get enough airflow, you get stuff like this. I don't think you can see it, but see these, I don't know if you can see the nails here. They look really dark brown. It's because they're all covered in rust. And if you look carefully at the picture, you'll see a little water droplet on every single nail there. When stuff in your attic hits the dew point, it will sweat, it will condense, and it will rain inside your attic no matter what's going on outside your attic. And if that happens for very long, you end up with cool stuff like this. So this is like, 3/8 of an inch thick fungus growth on the underside of somebody's roof, and mold and mildew and all sorts of nasty stuff. This week, I have probably been in 6 attics, and I would say that all of them have had fungal growth and mold and mildew. Most of them are pretty bad. This is what happens when you don't ventilate well, or at least you don't think about where your various envelopes are.
What can you do to kill that?
To kill it,
Yeah, to kill it.
you hire a mold remediator, and they come spray it with it. They usually have 2 things. So there's the stuff that kills botanicals, so it kills the stuff, and then they come through with a bleaching agent that makes it look better. One of the big causes is stuff like this. This is a kitchen fan or a kitchen fan duct. So somebody's down below, they're boiling a pot of water or something. It's taking all that steam and it's blowing it right up at the underside of your roof. This is super, super, super common. If your house was built before about 10 years ago and nobody's looked at this, this is probably what it looks like. This one I think is a bath fan. See all this black stuff? That is not soot. That is mold. So you take steam, you're sitting there in your shower, turn that fan on, it sucks all that steam out of the bathroom and puts it in just about the worst place it possibly could, which is on your very cold roof deck. One of the answers is to ventilate. You would think that most roofers would actually check code for ventilation. If you look at most roofing contracts, it will tell you that ventilation is to be replaced as is. So you need to be checking these things. So you want to have intake vents at the bottom. You want to have exhaust vents at the top. There is a code for this. We can talk about it if anybody really wants to. But adequate ventilation is important. Most people don't have enough. And then really quickly, I wanted to talk about HVAC stuff a little bit. The short answer is get a heat pump. There are all sorts of heat pumps. You want it to be inverter driven. The size and shape doesn't matter. Well, can't say it doesn't matter, but there are a lot of options. You can have high wall ones like this, which is what everybody thinks of for mini splits. You can have low wall ones, we can have concealed ones, we can have mini ducted ones, we can have full size furnace ones that look like this. Where these are all the same guts as a ducted mini, as a mini split, but it goes in a duct system. That's kind of what they look like when they're installed. I've been talking for a long time. I think I'm way over, but so if you ever want to talk about that stuff, there's a lot we could go over. Okay.
I'll have questions after.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Questions after.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
I have to say, those photos were highly motivating. I live in a historic home that was built in 1913. And I'm glad this is being recorded because I want to show those photos to my husband and say, we've had insulation put in, but I have a feeling we've got a lot of other things we need to look at. So thank you for those photos. They kind of are a little scary, but sometimes you get motivated by things that are scary. Okay. So thank you. Our next speaker is Taylor Swan of Energy Trust of Oregon. Please welcome him to the podium. Oops.
Sure. Thank you. Awesome. Can you hear me? Oh, you just
No.
turned off.
No.
Oh, there we go.
Nah.
Cool. Thank you, Jeremy. I learned a lot from that presentation. Appreciate it. I am here to talk about Energy Trust of Oregon, some of the incentives that we offer, and a couple other things. But first of all, how you doing?
Good.
Yeah, doing all right. Give me a okay, exhausted, good. All right. All right. Who here has come today and you feel like I have a decent understanding of the envelope of my home, energy efficiency, all that? Anybody? Okay. Wow. Yeah, I think I have a feeling that a lot of you in the room know more than I do, and that is okay. So please, when we get to the point of questions, or as you're asking questions, feel free to ask things and know that I might refer to some of you in the crowd, particularly Jeremy. I come from a teaching background. And I can hear my echo here and I hate it.
Exerting. Yeah.
Yeah. I come from a teaching background and now I get to work and doing a lot of these presentations and talking particularly about what Energy Trust is doing to help address some of the issues that Jeremy's talking about and encourage folks to make home repairs on their house. So this is what we're going to talk about in 3 different stages. One, we'll just talk about Energy Trust, why we do what we do. Then talk about how energy is used in the home as a whole, particularly identifying key energy users, systems, and appliances in your home, and then talk about home upgrades, priority energy upgrades in your home, and available savings. Sound good?
Taylor, would you try turning on and off the mic again? Because it wasn't doing that for Jeremy.
Well, because he was further away from the mic.
Oh, do I need to do this?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I can still hear myself.
Yeah, it's a pretty.
Can I do this?
Yes.
You can project.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, thank
We're a
you.
small group, so it's probably.
We want to hear you.
Great. Cool. Thanks, y'all. Here we go. Let's get started with Energy Trust of Oregon. Why we do what we do. We're an independent nonprofit, help people provide access to affordable energy, get access to affordable energy. We're serving over 2.4 million customers of Pacific Power, Portland General Electric, Northwest Natural, Cascade Natural Gas, and Avista. Anybody have any of these utility providers? Yeah, cool. Okay, most of us in the room. For those of you who don't, that is okay. What that means is the monies and the incentives that we offer are allocated to customers of those utility providers because it's those customers who pay into that fund. However, if you have a different utility provider, they also have incentives or other equivalents that are somewhat similar to what we offer. I just can't guarantee what they are because each utility provider can be different in that. Does that make sense? Cool. We help generate homegrown renewable power, and we are helping build a stronger Oregon and Southwest Washington. Our purpose is to help customers and communities reduce costs and realize additional benefits by saving energy and using renewable resources. Okay, so as Jeremy was talking about, this is a building envelope conversation, and one of the reasons why it's so important to make sure that your building envelope is healthy is because it saves energy. In particular, it helps reduce the amount of energy you're using, because as Jeremy was saying, if you're pouring all of your heat into your crawl space, you're using a ton of energy, right? Whether that's gas or that's electricity, maybe hundreds of dollars worth. I was talking with customers who were spending, just the other day, I was talking to somebody who's spending $900 on her energy bill this last month. Yeah, and then another customer who spent $1,300 on his energy bill. I was talking to about 3 weeks ago, right? If you're spending that much money, you are probably not being energy efficient if it's a single family, small home, right? Right, but it's probably fair to say. And so why reduce energy? Well, it lowers your utility bills. It reduces our reliance on unsustainable energy methods. And then what else? What are other reasons? What do you just get the crowd, you can shout it out, you can raise your hand. What are other reasons to reduce energy use?
Global warming.
Yeah. Moving to non-emitting resources, or at least reducing the amount of greenhouse gas emitting and other types of emitting non-renewable resources that we're using. Absolutely, yeah. What else?
A lot of energy saving measures also reduce airflow, which makes us feel more comfortable.
You reduce, like Jeremy was saying, you reduce your energy use, and all of a sudden you increase your comfort in the home significantly. Yeah, absolutely. Heat pumps are often a great example of that. Yes.
So another thing about the airflow, a lot of people have probably never had their ducts cleaned. The whole, the furnace and the input part and the output part. I saw somebody coming around doing duct cleaning, is all they did was take the vent out and vacuum inside of it. They did not, there's a special spinning brush thing that you can put in there and a great big vacuum cleaner that sucks all the dust and stuff out of there, which if you have had energy problems, that means it's moist in there. So then the ducts are growing mold and dust for you.
Right.
And the other thing, the fan blades get dust on them. And then also the filter too. If the filter's bad, and that's making your furnace less efficient.
Yeah. So you increase your health and safety within the home as you start paying more attention to some of these things Jeremy was talking about, and energy efficiency in general. Absolutely, that's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. Good, and we could probably think of more reasons, but we'll leave it there for now. Did you know for every dollar invested in energy efficiency, on average, customers save more than, or nearly more than, that $3.50? Yeah, that's a concept. All of a sudden, we're looking at not only increasing comfort, safety, all these things, but your return on investment is often significant, okay? I think y'all understand that. That's why you're here, right? Awesome. Cool. Well, that's who we are and why we do what we do. Now for home energy use. We're gonna talk about key users in your home. So what do you think? What is the largest consumer of energy in US homes? Any guesses? Actually, let's do this. You've got the list there. Turn to a neighbor. I'll give you about 45 seconds. Talk with a neighbor. What do you think of those four main categories? Don't count other. Those four main categories, what uses the most energy?
Am I heating and cooling?
My timer's not working. Yeah, go for it.
Lighting's pretty. We didn't need.
I was wondering what the 45 was.
Yeah, well, it was a timer at one point.
Your visuals were immensely helpful. And it's so true. Almost every single bit that I see on this exhaust vents are connected, lots of air, lots of gas.
Give me 5 more seconds here.
So many photos of just somebody went to Home Depot and bought some bats and threw them in their attic and called it a day. And I'm like, okay, wow, that's great.
All right. What do we think of these 4 categories? Any guesses? What do you guys say? Cooling? Anybody else? Anything else? Oh, wow, we're all just top A students here. Yeah, so these numbers are from a couple years ago, so they could be a little bit different now, but on average, the 4 main categories of energy users go from this order. Lighting uses on average 12% of the average use of energy in the home. Water heaters, 20%. Appliances, 23% of energy, and then the majority is in heating and cooling at 41%. However, for folks that I was mentioning earlier, like folks that are spending $900, $1,300 on their energy bills, that number for heating and cooling is probably closer to 80% or 90% of their energy use. Why? Because the problems that Jeremy was talking about are what spike your energy use significantly. So given that, then let's talk about this question: home upgrades, priority energy upgrades in your home and available savings. So given that most of the problems are here, what do you think are going to be the home upgrades that are the most likely to save you energy or help you reduce your energy use?
Insulation.
Insulation,
Air sealing?
Leaky windows?
window, so fixing windows or replacing windows?
Yeah, replacing.
Replacing windows,
Heat pumps.
Yeah, efficient.
HVAC systems, upgrading your HVAC systems is something that's efficient, whether that's a high efficiency gas furnace or a heat pump, like Jeremy was saying. Yeah, significant, very important if it's an outdated system or if it's an old electric forced air furnace or a electric resistance heat. Very important to upgrade that. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, let's talk about resistance heat just for a moment. Jeremy's mentioned it. And for those of you like me who didn't come in to this field knowing a lot, I do now. Well, I know some. Resistance heat means, think high resistance metals like a toaster, right? You turn the toaster on, all of a sudden a bunch of electricity is going through those metals that are very high resistance, increasing the temperature significantly and also making them shine, right? It's very bright. You look at a toaster. And then you put a fan in front of it, and that's your heating source. If you have a resistance heat source, whether that's cadet heaters, like heaters in your wall, space heaters, baseboard heaters, or forced air furnaces, okay? Forced air electric furnaces. If you have that, you're spending a ton of money in making it look pretty and light up, right? Because you could call that wasting. That's using a lot of extra electricity. If you switch to a heat pump, you're using electricity and pressurization and some fans to separate hot from cold air. And probably you're getting a 4 to 6 times increase in your energy efficiency. In other words, using 4 to 6 times less electricity to then heat your home or cool your home with the heat pump as compared to resistance heat. Does that make sense? Okay, you can ask me afterwards too. But yeah, that's the difference between heat pumps and electric resistance heat that Jeremy was talking about. Great. I did that. Cool. Now, biggest impact. Okay, so we mentioned all these things. We got insulation, air sealing. We've got, we didn't talk about water heaters. But then we mentioned upgrading your HVAC systems, also upgrading your water heaters. If you've got an old outdated water heater, that's right there. That unit in and of itself is using approximately 20% of your home's energy use. So upgrading, if it needs upgraded, is a really important step. If it's using electric resistance heat, switching it out with something that's not using electric resistance heat is also a really important step. Like a heat pump water heater, for example. And then windows. Windows, maybe it's as simple as, like Jeremy was saying earlier, making sure there's no more air leaks around your windows. Putting in extra caulking, spray foam, whatever it is. Here's an example of putting in more caulking around a window to make sure there's not air leaks going through. One of the challenges in energy efficiency conversations is that we have, as a society, often we've come around this concept that, I've got drafts in my home, or my energy bill is really high, so I should replace my windows. And that's not a bad thought, but like Jeremy was saying, this window is a hole in your wall, and it's a hole in your wall whether or not you replace it. So if I decide this window's bad, and maybe the U value is like 3.1, really bad. Does it go that high, Jeremy?
Wait.
That's what I did, thank you. Yeah. That's what I meant. 0.31. Thank you. Give me the look like, what did I say? Oh, dang it. So pretty high. If I then replace that with a really good brand new triple pane window that's cost me $1,000, $2,000, well, this would be more, right? But lots of money, and it gets down to 0.2 U value. Well, I still took a hole in my wall and replaced it with a hole in my wall. Okay. there's still, compared to the wall, like you were saying in the back, compared to the wall, that really expensive window is still transmitting a lot more cold into my house than the wall is. And so it makes a lot of sense to follow this order of thinking when looking at home energy upgrades in order to get bang for your buck, the best amount of return on investment is think about insulation and air sealing, then your HVAC system, mixed with your water heater, you can do those together, and then your windows. So is it bad to replace your windows? No, but if you want to get energy savings, think about those other things first. And then once you've done those, then start thinking about your windows. If your primary motivation is to decrease your energy use. Now, if you hate hearing as much noise through your windows, then that's another issue, right? Then maybe it's worth replacing it for noise reduction, because that could be significant. Yeah, we're on the same page? Jeremy, if I say something that's wrong, you just let me know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Yeah, go for
quibble
it.
with a few of the details on the windows, but the
Yeah.
overarching strategy is yes, you're definitely right on. Do the cost effective stuff first, which is that list right there.
Yeah, is there more to clarify there?
Well, I'm saying, so the other thing is, it's not so much how much energy you save, it's how much energy you save per dollar.
Yeah.
You can get great energy savings from windows. The problem is they're expensive. At least compared to almost everything else. I mean, just super ballpark. Windows are 40 to 50 bucks a square foot. Attic insulation is $3 a square foot. Attics, you're going from like an R11 to an R49 would be kind of average. A window, you're going from an R1 to an R3. So.
Yeah.
But it's cost effectiveness.
But would it be fair to say, Jeremy, that if you have like, I don't know, if your walls are R5 really bad and your attic insulation was built before 91, and so the R value is less than 18, and you replace the windows, you're probably not going to see a significant change in your energy bill because your biggest problems are still there, right? You might decrease your energy bill by like $20, even if you get really good windows. Is that fair to say, or is that?
Yeah, a lot of it just comes down to square footage, that you probably have 1,500 square foot of ceiling and you got 200 square feet of windows.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Cool.
What about window film?
What's that?
What about window film, the R value on window film?
We don't really get hardly any R value out of it. What it's really good at is stopping convective heat transfer, so drafts. I would say if you're doing it yourself and you get a good deal at the big box store on it, then it might be cost effective, but it's probably not terribly effective.
It's better than doing nothing if you can't, yeah. But also think about caulking and anything else around the window too. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Awesome. Thanks for chiming in there. Feel free. Awesome. All right. So what are the incentives that we offer? Well, this is not a complete list, but here are some of our offerings. Insulation, we offer incentives for attic insulation, floor insulation. And before I go any further, let me explain what an incentive is. All right. What we're trying to do is we're trying to encourage the use. Oh, wow. Now maybe I do need the microphone. We're trying to encourage, I hate that. We're trying to encourage the use of all of these things that contractors are offering, okay? Getting people to make these home energy upgrades. So what do? Well, we offer these incentives. What's incentive look like? Well, if you were to go home today and you're saying, hey, Jeremy convinced me I really want to put more attic insulation in my attic because I think that it's only a couple inches. So you could go on our website, for example. Christy will talk about another way to access this in a minute. But for us, if you go on our website, you could scan that top right image right there and go on our website. Go on the QR code there and see the attic insulation. Click on that. You'll see a list of contractors to recommend. Jeremy would be one of them. You could call the contractor, say, hey, I think my attic insulation is bad. Could you come look at it? Right? And they could come out and they could tell you, oh yeah, it's really bad. It's a couple inches. You would qualify for an energy trust incentive. So if the total, Jeremy, help me out. If the total job is like $6,000, you might get an energy trust incentive for how much?
Depends on what it is, but a couple grand.
Yeah, so you might knock off 10, 20%, sometimes maybe even 30% of your costs.
You can easily do 50. If you're doing attic insulation, 50% is not an uncommon number.
And if you're working with Christy and Seeds for the Soul, you might knock it down even more. Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. So that's how our incentives work, okay? They're incentivizing the purchase of or these repairs. Not all of them are as high as 20, 50%, okay? Heat pumps, you're looking closer to 20, 30%. Unless Jeremy, you say otherwise on your bids, but that's what I'm seeing.
And depends a lot.
Depends, yeah,
A lot
there's
of
so many
variables.
different variables, right? Gas fireplaces, furnaces, smart thermostats is a really good one. I don't have time to explain why they're so good. But you could save $100 on smart thermostats and only spend $20 total. It's really great. Water heaters as well, heat pump water heaters. Windows, our incentive is not great right now. Yeah, you might save 2% of your total cost. So don't recommend that one at the moment. Then we also offer some other things like air purifier incentives. Those often appear more as instant rebates at retailers. And then solar energy. If you have questions about that, you can ask me afterwards. Does that make sense? Yes,
She
questions?
said that there's a lot of things that determine what the amount of incentive is. Is there a place we can go look and see what those are? Can you give us a
Yeah.
list of what the incentive? Yeah, okay.
This website's gonna be your best guide because it's gonna ask you, hey, is your house primarily heated by by gas or by electricity? That's gonna determine things. And then also like for insulation, the amount of insulation you have currently will then determine the amount of incentive that you'll get for increasing it. So there's so many variables. That website is a really good guide. Also on that website is an online home energy. See if I have that here. Yeah, an online home energy assessment. And that will also, you can scan this QR code. That will kind of lead you through what to look for in your house and then what the incentives could be. Cool, cool, cool.
Are you not gonna talk about smart thermostats?
You can ask me afterwards. Yeah, I want to respect our time here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, all right. I hope we have time
Yeah,
for
we're good.
questions.
Yeah.
Our last speaker is Christy Urban from Seeds for the Soul. And I don't
That's
think
not
this is
working.
even on, so why am I doing it?
It's okay, we'll project.
Okay, all right, Christy, thank you. And let's go to your slides here.
Perfect, thank you. All right, well, if you've, heard all of this information from Jeremy and you're starting to question some areas in your home that might need upgrades, and you hear from Taylor that there's money available to do it, and it all feels like a lot, come talk to Seeds for the Soul. We are a free service here in Corvallis and all through the Mid and South Willamette Valley. And what we do is we help navigate this process. So I'll give a little bit of context of how we do this. So our program, we have something called the Rapid Revolve Fund. And what this fund is we pull in funds, whether that is from donations or community members loaning to our program. So let's say you have a huge, amazing savings account and it's just sitting there, not doing a whole lot. You can park some of your savings into our account. And what we do is we pay for these upgrades for low-income households. We help them navigate this incentive process with Energy Trust. We pay the contractor so that the contractor is not waiting for that funding to come back from Energy Trust. It takes some time. We go through that process, we get reimbursed, and then when you want your money back, we send it back over to you. So recycle and reinvest. So all of this funding, once we've identified an upgrade, an applicable incentive, it's all pre-approved. It's all a guaranteed process that this money just runs its cycle and comes back right where it started. So again, like I said, if you had some funds and wanted to do some work in your community, in 2024 is when Seeds for the Soul identified this gap that homeowners knew what upgrades needed to happen in their home and they qualified for these programs, but they didn't have the financial capacity to front that money, even if Energy Trust would be reimbursing them with this great rebate or their utility or their tax credit. And so that's where we could step in and offer that upfront coverage. But it was also for our contractors. If our contractors are going through this paperwork with Energy Trust or with your utility, they're sometimes waiting months. for that money to come back. And so they're just, waiting for that investment to come back. So in 2024 is when we started this rapid revolve account for these highly incentivized upgrades. And with $150,000, we revolved it 5 times and did $750,000 worth of work, which is huge. So if you were to just put $5,000 into the program for 1 year, it could do $25,000 worth of work in your community. So it's just something to consider. If you don't have the capacity or comfort in donating that amount of money, it could still do some work and come back to you. So households are served and you're still protecting yourself. So where this revolve account or this program, how it looks as a client, if you were to work with us, is we conduct a free home energy assessment, as Annette mentioned earlier. This is about a 30-minute assessment. We're going to come in, take a look around your home, identify the opportunities that you could improve your energy efficiency. Once we identify that for you, we will help you go through the bidding process with contractors. We'll help you decipher, make sure that you're getting a good price for what they're bidding for. And then we will take those bids and help, we're going ahead here, get pre-approval from the applicable programs to make sure that the bid that you have qualifies for the incentive you're intending to use. And then, as I mentioned, we can come in once the project's completed and pay the contractor on your behalf. We go through in submitting the documentation to be reimbursed by those utility programs. And then Seeds for the Soul is repaid. That money is back in our program, and we're moving on to the next household to work that same process. So the home energy assessment, as Annette mentioned, our assessment is a brief surface level assessment that is going to help you know where to start and sort of prioritize these upgrades. If you wanted to do a home energy audit, which is more involved, like Jeremy was talking about with the blower door test, that's a more involved process that would result in a home energy score. We do have resources and contacts for that sort of audit, but ours is not that. So sometimes people, we come to do their assessment and they're like, where's all your equipment? And there's a misunderstanding. So we just like to give some clarity around that. So that mine was very brief. So we have time for questions. If you have, really specific questions to your home, maybe we can wait just a few minutes and talk more over at the tables. But if you think it's a general question that we would all benefit discussing, that
So
would
do
be
you guys want to go
helpful.
sit up front?
Yeah, so we'll come up here. Feel free to just ask to the panel, or if you specifically want to ask Jeremy, you can do that as well. So thanks, guys.
So I have a specific question for Jeremy. I'm gonna try this again, because I don't know, Bree, is the recording gonna pick up the speakers?
Yeah.
Oh, it is, okay, so that's not,
Yeah.
we don't really need that then. So all these, photos that you showed, there were a lot of different parts of the house. Is that like a full day, commitment where you send somebody in to assess all those different parts of your home?
No, it doesn't usually take all that long. It depends a lot on how complicated your house is. You said you've got a 1915,
13.
1913. Some of the old houses are really cool and have all sorts of strange nooks and crannies, and those can take a couple hours. If you've
That's
got
all?
if you've got a 1970s 1400 square foot down the hall ranch, you get a pretty darn good idea in about a half hour.
Really? To do an assessment?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how in depth you want to go. If you want to do blower door testing, that kind of stuff, that can take a little bit longer. But if you want to get the kind of 90% or 95% knowledge on that, it doesn't take that long.
So there are 2 steps. One is you come in and you do an assessment, and then the second is to mitigate whatever problems you come up with. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, different companies are gonna do things different ways, and we're somewhat flexible to deal with homeowners however they wanna do it. Some people are super gung ho and they wanna know everything, and we'll come in on the first day and we'll do a really in-depth assessment and pressure testing and infrared thermography and all that kind of fun stuff. Most people just wanna know what the really easy wins are. And so we show up and be like, you don't have any attic insulation, you've got 2 inches of attic insulation. It doesn't matter that much if you have some sort of, bizarre thing going on with your door or your window latch won't close. Let's get your attic insulated.
Okay.
Especially considering the energy trust incentives or CPI incentives are so massive. Plus there's a tax credit after that, that a lot of this stuff is just amazingly affordable.
Right. All right.
I'm gonna add to that a little bit. When we say that the incentives are amazing, we really mean it. Like Jeremy briefly mentioned earlier that your insulation in your attic, the installer could be charging you, let's say $3 per square foot of insulation to be installed. The incentive is like $2.70. It's, it's almost completely covering, like we said, lots of variables, but it really can be that significant, especially if you are income qualified, which I think it's a pretty generous income qualification, which is something we could help you go through. There are even no cost opportunities that the incentive coverage meets or exceeds what the bid was for your insulation. So it's definitely worth looking at. And even, like both of them had mentioned, easily 20 to 30% of your cost could be covered. So the money's sitting there,
Plus, at least for the moment, a 30% tax credit.
Yes.
For the moment, at least.
Yes.
Okay, yes, Matt.
I had a question about the kind of like, I forget the name of the money recycling situation.
Oh, yeah, the revolve.
Revolving, yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the mechanism again for how that works? Sorry, I apologize. I was sneezing, I think, right as you were saying it, so.
It's okay. What we did with, like, in 2024, what we did is we went out to community members and we said, we've identified this need, and if we could be the connector between the customer, the contractor, and the utilities, so much more work could be happening, and the holdup is money. And so these community members loaned to us their savings, this amount of money. And so if we did a home energy assessment for someone, we knew that they needed attic insulation, we identified the incentive amount they could access, we could then take that program funding to pay the installer on the customer's behalf to make the upgrade happen. And then we would go through completing all of this paperwork with Energy Trust. Energy Trust reimburses us, let's say 4 to 6 weeks later. And, Joe's money is back in the revolve and he wants it back. So we pull it out and repay the loan that he's given to us. With donations, it's been donated. It can continue to be allocated to these projects and come back into the fund, indefinitely. So initially when Seeds for the Soul started, which some people here are familiar with, we were just looking at solar upgrades, and it was a very similar situation, but a little different in that the significant savings was in a federal tax credit. So if I got solar this year, I was going to get an amazing tax credit next year of $6,000. But I don't have the financial capacity to front $6 or $6,000 for the next 10 months. And so that's where we started the slow revolve. So we would loan to the client at the time. This is how we did it. We would loan to the client, and the following year when they got their federal tax credit and that $6,000 came back to them, they would repay us. And it was that same cycle. It's just a little slower. It's taking, a year or so at a time. But with these other energy efficiency upgrades, the incentives are higher and come back faster, but the gap was still there. So that's where we have the rapid revolve.
Okay, so it's just like it's like kind of just a timing thing with the incentive. So it's just really just it's kind of an accounting exercise.
Yep.
That's
cash
Is
flow.
it the amount of the incentive that or is it the total amount? So let's say it would cost $5,000 to do it, to do the job, and there's an incentive for 3,000. So then is it 3,000 that's used out of the revolving fund, or is it all 5,000 and then some of it's repaid with the incentives and some of it's repaid by savings on the energy bill or?
Yeah, so there's a couple options there. With the rapid revolve, yes, it is the incentive amount. So from that revolve fund, we would pay the installer that $3,000. And in some cases, like our more middle income households, they will have capacity in one way or another to cover that 2,000 themselves. So that's one option. The other is to combine our two programs. So the $3,000 would come from the rapid revolve that would pay really quickly from the incentive. And the $2,000 would then come from our slow revolve, and the customer would pay from their energy savings. So if you had no insulation in your home and now we've insulated every space and you're saving $50 on your electric bill every month, we would then build your payback schedule at, let's say, $35 a month, because we want you to see some benefit from this investment that you've made. But then it's not negatively impacting your budget, because that $50 was already going to your energy bill. Now it's just going to paying off your loan to upgrade your home.
It's a brilliant program. It's just
Good idea.
amazing.
Good barrier.
So I was gonna say that, but also, Christy, I believe,
Yes.
I believe, I saw that it's either income qualified homeowners or landlords of income qualified households, which is also brilliant, because there's that kind of perpetual issue of the landlord doesn't pay the utilities, the tenant pays the utilities, the tenant can't do anything to improve the home, the landlord doesn't have the incentive to. So sounds like that circumnavigates that, but how does that part work if the tenant is paying the utility, but the homeowner is the one? Like, how does that work?
So there are a couple things. It really depends on the landlord that we're working with. Like, one of our biggest barriers here in Corvallis, being a college town, is we work with property managers. That's a whole nother thing to navigate. But what we can do is, with permission from the landlord, we have to, do the home energy assessment with them. We can access the incentive amount based on the income level of the tenant. And typically landlords to some capacity could cover the gap if they were incentivized enough to upgrade the home. So if we're looking at insulating and the incentives covering 70% of the cost, that would be kind of hard as a landlord to turn that away, because you just invested into the value of your property. That's usually how we can phrase it, is that you are investing in the value of the property. Or you just have really nice landlords that want to help out their tenants. So, but again, it's hard. It's a college town.
Can I jump in that too?
Yeah.
Christy? Yeah, the phrasing that you're increasing the equity of the house, and you're getting a 70% discount to do it, so that you'll see the equity when you sell the house. It's a significant return on investment there. But then also something to note is that Free Seeds for the Soul in particular can work with single family homes and small multifamily homes, meaning any like side-by-sides, duplex, anything like that. But as soon as you start stacking units on top of units, you're now talking big multifamily, large multifamily unit homes, and that's when Seeds for the Soul cannot use our incentives. However, Energy Trust still has incentives for those. It just wouldn't be through Seeds for the Soul anymore. Just be regular apartments incentives. Yeah.
So then I have a general question, but it'll be specific things about for a couple of you. So I'm wondering how the city can help all this stuff happen. So one question maybe for you would be, if the kind of revolving fund is not available for the multi-unit dwellings from Seed for the Soul, let's say the city decided to put some money into a revolving fund for that, for those multi-unit dwellings, then we could follow the same model. Is that right?
So I don't know that, let's chat afterwards. I'll give me my business card. We do have a program that takes large multifamily units or organizations and helps them get access to similar incentives in a similar way. Yes, I don't know that we're actively enrolling new partners into that right now, but I can get back to you on that.
I think another way the city can help big time, and I've thought this for years, is they could definitely help promote and educate the community about the availability
Yeah.
of these programs.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I agree 100%.
continuously
Yeah.
promoting them
I agree.
and letting
Yeah.
people know
Yeah.
what a good opportunity.
Yeah. And then,
Oh.
can I go ahead?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like with us, the city has invested in our Revolve program and it's helped immensely. And you know, the need for families is never ending and, you know, we take anything we could get to grow our program, especially with, our reach growing.
So another question, I sorry to
That's
not let it in
okay.
and kind of follow up on that. I'm thinking, as I'm listening to all of you talk, I think, okay, well, what if we had a lot of money that we could, for this cash flow issue, then are there some other bottlenecks we should look ahead to? Like the number of people who can do the assessments is that something that we should be looking at if we try to plan out scaling up the whole thing somehow?
Mhm.
Maybe by help with the city, are there some other things that would end up being bottlenecks that we should be looking ahead to?
I mean, I think staff capacity is definitely something to consider, but something that Energy Trust has so kindly invested in is financially supporting us in a way that we could grow. Like prior to May of last year, it was me, myself, and I doing this entire process. I was doing the home energy assessments. I was assessing estimates, going through all the paperwork. But with investments from partners like Energy Trust, we were able to hire 3 additional staff members. And training was quick. So it's like, while it's a bottleneck, if the money's there, the capacity to grow is pretty rapid, to be honest.
Let's chat more afterwards.
Yeah.
So glad you're here.
Yes, that's
Thank
great.
you.
I have a question.
Gwendolyn, yeah.
Or Jeremy, so you were talking about what's important is insulation and air sealing, but also the airflow in your roof is really important. So, yeah, I hardly have airflow in my roof. So are there incentives for stuff, those vents, which I do not have, or are ways to get help to do that? Because I haven't heard too much about that tonight.
Yeah, so at least from an energy trust perspective and most of the utility programs, they would consider that to be an integral part of insulating your attic.
Oh,
And so, say for example, with the energy trust, if you want their attic insulation incentive, there's a list of, I don't know, a dozen, 20, somewhere in there, things that you need to make sure are up to spec. So it's not just, hey, you add in insulation, it's we need to make sure the ventilation is up to spec, to make sure the bath fans vent out, the heat producing devices are baffled. There's kind of a list of things, and they would consider that to be what they call a complete measure. But there's no, unfortunately, standalone incentive that I know of for just ventilation.
So it comes as part of the package.
Yeah, so like if we were to look at your home, we would need, in order to access the incentive, Jeremy would need to come in and say, you only have 8 inches of insulation. So while we're insulating, adding to the insulation in the space, we could also do the venting and wrapping your ductwork and everything.
okay. Oh, that makes sense. Thank you.
And Seeds for the Soul would be a good place to start for that, because if you go through like our general incentives or our savings within reach incentives, which are for income qualified folks, through our website, the incentive amount isn't going to be high enough, most likely, to both cover the installation of the installation and those extra costs. However, if you go through a community partner like Seeds for the Soul, there's a higher chance that our incentive amount will be enough to cover or at least help with the installation and those extra costs.
I'll be at their doorstep.
The way to think about it is these incentives, it's sort of a tiered access. So anyone under these utilities could go to the Energy Trust of Oregon website and access an incentive. And then if you were to go a step further and say, well, I'm income qualified, they have a program called Savings Within Reach. So that would be an increased incentive amount. If your income falls below the next income threshold, that's where you would work with partners like Seeds for the Soul. And we have the highest tier of incentive that you could access with Energy Trust. And with accessing that increased incentive, you're getting the support through the whole process and help with the documentation. And
So you can see if you income qualify, you can
Yeah,
come
we've
back to
got-
the table afterwards and Like that too, yeah.
One really important thing to know about when they're talking about income qualified is at least some of the income thresholds are rather shockingly high. So the savings within reach one is kind of the most common that we talk about. It's indexed by the number of people in your household, but for a family of two, I think it's
82 or 83.
I think it went up to 85 or
Yeah.
87,000 at the start of the year. And you get basically $10,000 per additional person in your household. So, you know, if you got a couple of people living in your house, you can make $100,000 and still be income qualified.
That's amazing to me. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that more than half of people that I talk to qualify under one of the income
Yeah.
tiers.
yeah.
And some of these people are people who have plenty of assets. So.
Yes, yes.
So this is too specific. I can chat with somebody afterwards, but I know in some places installation incentives require that you have zero installation at the starting point. Anybody able to say whether that's true here?
That is not the case. You can have some insulation present and it'll look, and correct me if I'm wrong, if they look at your attic and you have like 10 inches here, but 6 inches here and nothing here, sort of an average of that coverage.
R19 is our cutoff right now, so if you have on average over R19, then you would not qualify for the energy trust incentive, yeah.
Well, specifically for attic insulation. So for
Mhm.
floor and wall insulation, it's a little bit different story. There are thresholds. They're essentially, the thresholds are so low that pretty much if you have any floor insulation or any wall insulation, then you're pretty unlikely to qualify for energy trust incentives. They don't have much in the way of making things better for those. But most people, you either have floor insulation or you don't. Kind of the same with wall insulation.
But as Jeremy said, sometimes you have floor insulation and it's just, it needs to be hired. That's not the right word.
Right.
Right.
That's good.
Very good.
Do you have a question, Ken?
Yeah. So with the split heat pumps, just a simple through the wall thing, not involved with your furnace and everything, what's the, what do you call it, the efficiency of it, like 250% or 300%, you know, per the, how are you put in and how much you get out of it?
Okay, so
Or is
without
that-
talking for too terribly long, the probably most useful unit of measure for this is called a coefficient of performance. It's called the COP. So this is if you put in 1 unit of energy, whether that's electricity or gas therms or, you know, whatever it is, what do you get back out in heat or whatever you're, you know, it's essentially just a conversion factor. So it depends a lot on what heat pump you buy, but a good ductless heat pump will have a coefficient performance over 4 at 47 degrees outside, which is how they're usually rated. So if you put in 1 unit of energy, you're getting roughly 4 back out.
What was the temperature you said?
So they're usually rated at 47 degrees.
Oh, 50, okay. Yeah, okay.
By convention. Actually, probably by federal rule.
Yeah, they're amazing pieces of equipment. I mean, why didn't somebody think of it before? Yes.
I kind of had a follow-up question about heat pumps. So like I've been considering getting a mini split kind of for like a back office area, a pretty small one. And I know a little bit about energy efficiency things. And one of the things that I've heard is that the installation process is really key to having the heat pump be as efficient as it can, right? So like, you know, probably not a DIY for my level of talent, or maybe anybody's. But like, do you have any suggestions about like how to access that? First of all, is that something that if you kind of go through the Energy Trust, and there's an incentive and you get a contractor that is going to be, you know, like kind of approved, that you're likely to be good to go there? Or is there any guarantee? Because I've heard mixed results.
So.
Sorry, is that
No,
is that a question to ask at the table? Should I not?
It's a sensitive question, isn't it? Because I know
So-
Energy Trust has trade allies.
Yes.
You know, that they have vetted.
How about,
But-
how about I talk to what vetting means first?
Yes, we'll go down the line.
I'll be as objective as I can. So to be vetted, it means you have done, they have done our 3 hours of specification and manuals training on how we say it should be done. Okay, they go through that process. They say, yes, I want to do this. They sign some papers. They're in our system. From there, then if we do quality inspections, which we're doing more of now, 1 in 10 is our goal, and we exceeded that significantly this year. But we're trying to every 10 projects that contractor would do, we're trying to inspect at least one of those, okay? So the further they get into our system, the more years they've been in our system, the more vetted they are, if that makes sense. It doesn't mean we're gonna catch everything that any mess, no, but we are trying to get better and better at that. So we are doing some quality assurance, but it does not guarantee that they're gonna be a perfect contractor. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. This particular one though, is just kind of, I've heard that this particular installation, like maybe some of the other things, it's probably not as touchy, although it sounds like the installation is, but
Yes,
but
absolutely.
this particular one with the heat pump, I know that it's kind of touchy. The heat pump is a really great thing as long as it's installed appropriately. Is that right?
And
He
I wanna
also
see what
does
Jeremy has to say,
HVAC,
yes.
Have I heard correctly?
Yes, that is 100% true. Obviously I could be a little biased and tell you, just call me and I'll take care of it. But other than that,
I would approve
you
that. I mean,
just do your due diligence. There is no, some contractors will give you a guarantee. You can buy manufacturer's warranties that can sometimes cover labor. But just because you pulled a permit and our beloved city or your beloved city came and said it passes code, and just even if it passes energy trust inspection, does not mean it's actually functioning properly, or certainly not at top level. I wish I had some great way to tell you who's a good contractor and who's not.
So I have a follow-up question. I never thought about this because we had a mini split put in, I don't know, 6 years ago or something like that. How do we know if it is working at maximum efficiency?
Well, have you ever had it serviced?
I think so. My husband takes care of that. I mean, of calling the company.
Hire a competent service tech to come check it at least every couple of years.
Okay.
Ideally you do annual service, and most shops will give you a pretty significant discount if you do annual service versus intermittent, because it's a lot easier to keep up on it than to fix it when it goes bad.
Okay. So what kind of a test do they do to determine whether or not it's working well?
There are a couple of things you can do. So pretty much every heat pump is going to have a nice computer inside that's going to do onboard diagnostics. So you can, just like your car, you can run it for codes essentially.
Not my car.
Uh,
I don't have one.
One, kind of proof in the pudding, you can check the coil temperatures coming off,
Okay.
see if it's really getting the job done. And you can also check for refrigerant charge. So if somebody screwed it up and it's still working, chances are it was a refrigerant charge issue, and they make gauges for that.
Okay. I feel like I'm learning an awful lot tonight. This is
And
great. Yes.
I just want to put a little plug for having heat pump service because I had one installed at my place, not here, but elsewhere. And I was surprised at how high my bills still were. So I had somebody come out and service and they were like, it's because you put your remote control and its little holder thing on the wall right in line with the heat pump. So it kept short cycling, which means it kept turning itself off because it'd be like, oh, it's plenty warm. And it turned itself off. The whole other side of the room wasn't warm at all. So it's sometimes really little things, but the folks who commission these systems can get it really working well for you.
And to piggyback on that, I've done, and I'm sure Christy can speak to this as well, done home energy assessments where I go into a home that has had a ducted heat pump already installed. And the customer switched from either electric resistance heat or switched from gas. And this particular with gas, if you switch from a gas furnace to a heat pump, your dollar amount might not change much. If anything, it might even go up a little bit, depending on lots of variables. Because gas costs differently than electricity does, right? So it's not a one-to-one change right there. But what often happen in these homes then is I see customers then turn off their heat pump as much as they possibly could, or turn it down significantly. And so if you install a heat pump, make sure to listen to your contractor and even ask them if they don't tell you, how do you recommend using this thing? Because in many cases, our slogan is set it and forget it. Many cases it's better off doing its thing and not changing more than 2 degrees per season, just being set there. Jeremy, I'm relying on you to.
Yes, all that is true. And then so all heat pumps are not created equal. One of the
biggest things is there are the kind of traditional American heat pumps that have been around since the 70s. They really only work when it's mild outside. As soon as it gets cold enough to really need it, they generally need to shut down and have backup heat. For the past, say, 15 years, better stuff has been available. I really don't know why people still sell and buy the old stuff. But inverter driven, scroll compressor driven stuff, if you get the right equipment, can work just fine no matter what temperature. So like a ductless heat pump will not have any backup. And if you get a good one, it'll work down to like, you know, single digits or negative digits of outdoor temperature without needing any backup. A traditional heat pump is going to shut down at probably 30 to 35 degrees, and your backup heat strips or whatever you got for your backup will take over. And so at that point, your cost of heating might double, triple, quadruple.
What did you call the ones that work better?
There are a bunch of names for them.
Is there
Extended
some-
capacity. Extended capacity is, you know, a really safe term. So extended capacity basically means it's going to work below, you know, say 15 to 20 degrees outside. There's probably a super formal definition for it somewhere, but inverter driven is another one. So basically these are DC motors. So, you know, a traditional heat pump, the thing's either on or off, right? Maybe if you got a fancy one, it might be like a 2-speed or a 3-speed. The inverter driven ones run on DC motors. They're all electrically commutated, so they can turn themselves up and down. So basically, instead of turning on and off, these things are designed to turn up and down, and they run 24/7. But as those DC motors slow down, they become significantly more efficient. And so run the thing on low all the time gives you some pretty huge energy savings.
Yeah.
Um,
So it's 8:30 and we promised people we'd quit at 8:30. So I wanted to check Jeremy. I know Christy's gonna stay. Taylor, are you gonna stay? So let's thank our speakers. So you still had questions, so, you know, have at it. Yeah.